Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me thank you for being here. The stories on this podcast are meant to let you know that you're not alone in what you're going through and that we can all find strength in struggle with the right perspective. If you've been enjoying the podcast, let me ask that you leave a review on your platform of choice to help us grow so that we can continue to make the world a better place, one conversation at a time. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode to be decided. We do not have a number for this episode for good reason. I think it'll become apparent as we talk through the conversation why some of this might not be able to come out right now. But regardless, I am here in Philadelphia with a very, very, very special guest, Chris Gabayan. Chris, what's going on, man?
Joe, thank you for having me. To be honest, it's been a long day. I woke up at 4 a.m. to drive an hour and a half to the airport. Took a really nice nap on the plane just to get here. And now we're here recording a live podcast. I've been looking forward to this for, if not months, a little over a year at this point. I know we've been talking about it, and it's just a really great opportunity and honor to be here with you, Joe. So thank you.
The honor's all mine. Yeah. The first, I feel like one of the first times we ever connected, we talked about maybe sitting down and having a conversation that would be recorded. And I remember you mentioning something about not yet. And I didn't fully understand it at the time. I'm not sure I still fully understand it now, but I think after this conversation, I will. And so before I introduce you in any way, shape, or form, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself.
All right. Well, everyone, my name is Christopher Gabayan. I am currently 26 years old, originally from Long Island, New York, now living in North Carolina at the moment. And I think the best way to describe me at this point in my life is that I'm an active duty Army captain, but currently in transition out of the military in pursuit of full-time entrepreneurship. I've been in the Army almost 5 years now, and recently I have just felt called to move into a new chapter of life in which, Joe, you have helped me incredibly in pursuing. And I'm in a really exciting time. My past 5 years in the military has been, I like to call it dense. It hasn't been long, but it has been packed full of a lot of events, whether professionally, personally, in terms of what I've done, where I've been. And as you mentioned before, I wasn't ready to share some of my story in regards to my career and things that have happened. But as I transition out now, and whenever this episode may be released, I think it is a perfect time to, one, talk about it in a setting where I feel comfortable and ready to do so, but also in this time of life where transition is kind of the biggest priority. And we talk about transitions all the time. And I'll tell you, this is probably the biggest one I've gone through in my life in the past 10, 12 years. And I'm excited to share it with you, excited to share it with everyone else, the support from not only the Project Endure community, the BPN community, but the people in my life has been phenomenal. And I can't thank you and everyone else enough for supporting me in this endeavor.
I think we need to thank you for one, following your heart, for two, sharing your story with us here, and for three, just the light you are in the world every single day. It's one of the things that stood out to me about you since the first time we met was just how intentional you are, how positive and optimistic and encouraging you are. And I'm really excited to talk about how you became that way, because I know for a fact that some of the most beautiful people I know have gone through some really, really, really hard times to get there, and they wouldn't be the person they are without those hard times. Before we talk about any of that, I am curious, because I don't think you and I have talked about this. How long did you live in New York for? And what parts of you now would you say you can trace back to your roots in New York? Like, because I think people from New York, if you hear someone's from New York, people have this image that pop into their mind. And I'm curious what characteristics you feel like you got from New York.
So let's start out with the beginning of the question. I was born on Long Island, raised on Long Island, and I went to college at St. John's University. And so all the way up through college graduation, born, raised, bred, New York, from my two parents that are Filipino immigrants. And so I was born here. Parents were both born in the Philippines. So that brings us to about 18 years of living in New York through college. And I say this all the time. I was absolutely blessed and lucky to be born and just to grow up in a New York environment. I grew up in an extremely diverse community that had pockets of culture in every single part of my 2 mile long town. And what was great is I didn't know anything else but diversity. I heard so many different ideas, cultures, backgrounds, upbringings from different friends, families, and communities that as I left New York and went to Virginia first and then North Carolina, I had this realization of how good my life actually was in terms of culture, diversity, understanding I think the essence of the American dream, as cliche as that sounds. But my parents both were born in the Philippines. My dad came over when he was 2 years old, and my grandparents immigrated. But my mom came over after they had gotten married. So hearing both of their experiences growing up there for a little bit for my dad, but then my mom and what they've been through, they really did everything that they could to provide us, me and my three sisters, it wasn't an extravagant life, and we didn't suffer in New York. However, we did go through our own challenges growing up as an immigrant family and having that traditional culture of the Philippines mixed with Western American culture, which I like to say I'm a pretty good blend of. So growing up in New York, especially with my family and with the friends that I had friends of every single kind of background and upbringing, which was extremely valuable. I didn't know then, but coming into the military, if anything, it was a phenomenal place to grow up, whether I knew it or not. And it goes to say I don't have a New York accent, which I'm extremely, I guess, proud of in a way, because I don't walk and talk and drink coffee on Long Island, which everyone says, like, oh, you're from New York. I'm like, you don't sound like you're from New York, but I am. I will always be a New Yorker. If I wasn't wearing this hat right now, I'd probably be wearing my St. John's hat or my Yankee hat. Um, but it was a phenomenal time growing up in New York. I miss it. It will always be home. I don't even consider North Carolina now, where I live, to be my home. New York, the places, the people, the memories, the experiences, whether good or bad, will always be considered home to me.
There's a certain toughness that comes with New York, at least through my experience. I grew up in northern New Jersey and spent a lot of time seeing family and just being in New York City and in the surrounding boroughs. But there's this toughness that I think you get. I don't know if it's grittiness. I think Philadelphia has a grittiness. New York maybe has a toughness. But I would imagine you're not a pushover, even though on the surface you're very kind and gentle and understanding. I could also see through that exterior to the fact that you are able to stand firm in what you believe in. And I'm almost wondering if that comes from your upbringing, comes from New York, or that's just part of who Chris is.
It's definitely a blend of everything you just mentioned. My family, New York. Um, I know everyone has that stereotypical, well, everyone has that stereotype of New Yorkers are tough and they're maybe a bit standoffish. I tried not to absorb and internalize New York, I guess, culture as my own. My parents are gentle. My parents are kind and respectful. And I think in the nature of being generous, being altruistic, and living a service rooted lifestyle, I definitely have a more, I'd like to say I have a more approachable persona on the exterior, but definitely through some challenges and things that I've gone through on my own, whether New York related or not. I've learned now to stand firm in my beliefs, my values, the things that I hold true in pursuit of the life that I want to build with specific people, places, ideas, businesses in mind. And so it's definitely a mix of family, New York, and just things that I've experienced myself. And so I appreciate that comment of me, Joe.
Of course. Yeah, it's something that has become clearer and clearer to me the more that I've gotten to know you. And I think the best way to get to know anybody is to hear the story, right? Your life story. And I think a big part of getting to the root of somebody's life story is understanding the harder parts of that life story. And so the first big question of the podcast always is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle? Something in your life that you didn't get to choose for yourself.
So here we go. I came into this podcast today knowing what story and what parts of my story I wanted to tell, but this may be the first time I'm vocalizing this in a public space for other people to hear. Um, I've spent almost 5 years in the United States Army at this point, and while I said it was a dense career for good and bad reasons, I've experienced a lot of life in just short of 5 years, and it helped me mature a lot faster than I believe I would have I would have experienced in any other part of life. Not saying that another occupation wouldn't have, but almost at an accelerated pace just due to the things that I've experienced. I say this with the fact that I've had a great time in the military overall. The best thing about it are the people. Unfortunately, some of the worst things that I have experienced were because of select individuals and certain circumstances that happened that led me to encountering those individuals. So I'm going to trace this all the way back to 2020. And that's about 2 years in the military for me. I'm a first lieutenant at that point, and my life was going really well for the past 6 years at that point through getting an ROTC scholarship to go to St. John's University, preparing all those 4 years in order to commission as an active duty officer, and coming into the active duty Army, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as people would say. I was eager. I was extremely eager as a young officer to do the best that I could. And at that point in my career, I was moving from a platoon leader job, which is I was responsible for roughly around 40 to 80 people. It's like the first job that any new officer gets. And I had been selected to move into the role as an executive officer, which is the second in command of a company. And at that point, my company was about, I'd like to say maybe 160, 180 people. And being an executive officer, XO, as people know it, it's a very pivotal and crucial position to help keep the company running. You have your hand in a little bit of everything. You're not an expert in anything in particular, but you have to be good in so many different areas of training, administrative functions, taking care of soldiers, because you are a leader and you are the second in command. You are supposed to be the aide to the commander who oversees the company. And it was an honor to be picked for this position. And so here I am in this position. Everyone calls you the big XO. It's like big man on campus, and that's how I felt. I've been working so hard to pursue some opportunities to become executive officer, and things were going really well in my career. I was picked to be the officer in charge, or OIC, of a specific training competition for some of my soldiers out of the entire brigade of lieutenants. And at that point, there was probably 25, 26 lieutenants. So they had picked me to train the entire brigade's worth of soldiers to prepare for this competition. It was a physical competition. You had to be tactically proficient, ready with medical readiness skills, anything you think about being a soldier. We had to prepare. And so myself and my non-commissioned officer in charge, right-hand man, one of my best friends now, we were working really hard to prepare these soldiers for this competition. And throughout, it was about a month and a half, almost 2 months of intense training. Um, we were working really hard to get ready for that day of comp. That it was about to be 3 days of competition, and so the morning of the competition was about to begin. I just being tired and going through a lot of training and still handling my responsibilities as an XO. I woke up late. I think we had to be where we needed to be at 4 in the morning, and I might have woken up at maybe 3:30. And so I woke up, rushed out of the house as fast as possible, everything I needed, and I started making my way to post. I live off post, and so making my way onto Fort Bragg. And I wasn't speeding. I wasn't, driving at an insane speed. But I was in a hurry. I was in a hurry. And once I got onto post on a road that I had driven down every single day beforehand, um, don't know what it was, Joe, but as I'm coming into the main part of post, about a minute or two before the place I need to be, um, I'm driving by and I see police lights behind me. I pull over and I ask what's going on, and police said, like, "Sir, like we caught you speeding. Like, how how is that even possible? And they clocked me at 83 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone. And Joe, between you and between God, I still have no idea how or why they clocked me at that speed. People fly up and down that road every single day, 65 miles per hour. And I'll be honest, I may have been going 65 miles per hour, 60 miles per hour, but absolutely no way 83. And I'm questioning them, asked them to bring a supervisor over, but what ended up happening, they clocked me at 83 and a 45, and I was arrested. I was put in handcuffs um, on a military police car, and I was brought to the military police station. This is about 3 something, 4 something in the morning, and I had to get picked up by my current commander at the time, and all in a matter of a short, maybe 1 to 2 hours, I was then fired from my job as the executive officer. I could not compete in the competition with my soldiers, of course, which was a huge disappointment from me to them because they had no idea what happened to me. My driving privileges on post were revoked for an entire year, so I could not drive on the installation for an entire year. And I was in risk of getting it's called the General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand, essentially a big note from the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division, where I came from, saying, this person is unfit to be an officer, kick him out of the Army. And so I had been building up for 2 years just in the Army a bunch of opportunities for myself. Not only was the OIC for that competition, just the day before, I was recommended by our brigade commander, the one that oversees the entire unit, that I was recommended to be a general's aide. And what that is, it's a very sought after position by young officers, essentially saying, hey, this is our best officer. We recommend him up to the 82nd Airborne Division to be an aide to a general. They already put my name in for recommendation. They had written my packet, and right then and there, it was revoked. I also had a dream of serving in the 75th Ranger Regiment. For people that who know that it is, or maybe people that don't, it is one of the Army's most elite units. And I was in conversation with one of the commanders down there that wanted to specifically bring me in to try out for that unit. That opportunity was revoked from me immediately. I wasn't going to get any recommendations. And so everything that I had been building up for the past 6 or so years through college and my active duty career was taken away from me for a reason I did not know why. I can take the responsibility of knowing that I was driving faster than I should have, but not charged with careless and reckless driving by speed. And that's what they gave me. A couple days go by, and fortunately enough, my company commander, my direct supervisor, and then my battalion commander, two supervisors up, had vouched for me all the way up to our biggest boss, saying, this guy's a good guy. We don't know what happened. We recommend for him to stay in the military. And fortunately enough, I was retained. I was not given that reprimand, which was an absolute blessing. I was still removed from the job that I had and kind of just taken away. Imagine being a coach almost of like a sports team, and then just one day coach is gone. That's what happened to me. And my name was plastered essentially amongst a notice board across the entire division. So everyone knew Lieutenant Christopher Gabayan, the lieutenant that got arrested. It was known across the entire post. Every single person knew, because it's not common for an officer to get arrested. So there's that part of the story that leads into a much bigger part that I have discussed. Because of not being able to drive on post and wanting to find another opportunity, my battalion commander had said, Chris, we know that you're a good officer. We know that you're a good leader, and we want to perhaps give you another chance. Your old unit, the old company I was working for my first year, is leaving for Poland in, I think at that point it was like in 5 weeks. Mm-hmm. And at first I denied the opportunity because I didn't want to be away. I was a wreck, Joe. I'd like to say I was depressed. I have felt a level of darkness and just losing everything that I'd worked for in the past couple of years was just gone. I didn't tell anyone except for some really close friends that I had, and my parents didn't know, my family didn't know, so I just kept it, and I kept trucking along at work. and people humiliated me publicly at work. They gave me, gave me the side eye, kind of cast this like dark cloud around who I was because of what happened. And so everything that I worked for people that didn't know, they just knew me as the officer that got arrested. I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but what this did is it put me on that deployment. It put me on that deployment for around 10 months, a non-combat deployment to Poland, and it was a mess. It was a mess preparing us to leave the country. We were working maybe from 6 a.m. to 10, 11 p.m. for 3, 4 weeks straight. And what this led into is discovering and knowing that my commander, my new commander at the time, um, was not just an incredibly malicious, toxic, negative individual leader, but they were one of the one of the worst people I've ever met in my entire life. Again, as an executive officer, the right hand man to a commander, for the entire time that we were in Poland, this person badmouthed me, patronized me on the daily basis, um, had said some extremely toxic and venomous things about myself, our peer leaders, about soldiers, was making up stories, was sweeping illegal things under the rug. And I had to continually work for this person, um, kind of blindly just saying, Roger that, and I will continue doing my job. I had no leg to stand on, really. I just had to Roger up, as we say, and do my job. Um, I just started seeing a behavioral health specialist, a psychologist, um, and I started to review these events with with him. And without providing all the details, he essentially told me that I've gone through extensive psychological abuse from this individual, and it hurt me for a long time. Working for this person day in and day out, working in Poland from 6 in the morning to 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1, 2. I have like videos and pictures of my face, and I looked like I was dying on the outside. It was the lowest level of darkness and desperation I had faced in so long. And I have been depressed before. I have been suicidal in previous years of my life, way back. And those feelings of darkness and desperation that I felt from losing my job, from losing everything that I worked for working for this toxic, hateful individual every single day, just to unfortunately just have to comply and listen. Joe, I was desperate. I have never wanted to quit something ever before in my life, and I never have. But being over there in country with this individual made me want to quit like never before. I fortunately did not. With enough complaints, we eventually was able to put this commander under a legal investigation. And being the second in command, I became the commander for about 35 days. And for lack of a better terms, there was peace in the kingdom. Everyone knew me again as Big XO, was able to get all the things done. I was doing 75, 80% of my commander's job already while they were taking credit and taking responsibility of the unit, which is an executive officer's job for the commander. However, never once did this person genuinely thank me. Never once did this person have anything nice to say. It was very two-faced. It was malicious. They would put on face in front of our higher ups. And Joe, I was treated just so poorly over there. Never have in my life by any other individual, disrespected to the most extent. And I felt there was no professionalism. There was zero respect between this individual to me, while I had to still respect them. And it was just some of the darkest times of my life, without wanting to cause harm to myself. I'll be honest with you, Joe. One day this person had got under my skin so bad. I've never wanted to physically harm someone before, but I almost punched this person in the face. I'd like to consider myself a very patient, well-mannered, respectful individual, but I wanted to punch this person in the face for not just disrespecting the people around me, myself, but for just continually thinking that they can be this kind of this malicious individual and get away with it. But eventually, I was able to make it through, finish out because I knew it was going to end sometime. And I made it home back to the United States. We left September of 2020, and I came back after many long travel delays on July 4th of 2021. So what a better day to come back to.
And I have a lot of questions. I think the first one that popped into my mind when you told that whole story was, what did you feel on the inside when you got pulled over? Not only got pulled over, but then had handcuffs placed on you out of the blue. Like what even goes through your mind, or what do you feel in your gut in that scenario?
My stomach sank. I knew what all that meant once it happened. I did my best to talk to the supervisor, the military police supervisor, as to what was going on, what happened, try to convince them otherwise. And once they told me to step out and they put cuffs on me, I knew, I already knew what I was losing. And I was almost denying it to myself because I didn't want to face it. But it all came very true extremely fast. Throughout those times before, when we were still in country, still in the United States, before we left the country, I felt so desperate because I was having to wake up earlier to drive to a friend's house for them to bring me to work and then still rely on other people at 10, 11 p.m., 12 a.m. to pick me up just to do it again the next day in a couple hours. It wasn't the work itself, Joe. It wasn't the hours. Of course, those are difficult circumstances, but having to continually comply and respect someone who didn't just did not reciprocate any respect or professionalism. It felt I was in a vicious cycle because I couldn't avoid it. I couldn't escape it. I barely had time to sleep, and who knows the negative health effects that that had on me. I was desperate. As I told you, like it felt as I was when I was suicidal or when I was really depressed, but um, I didn't want to harm myself. It was just I knew what I was experiencing. I knew what I was going through, but I couldn't escape it, and so I just had to live. I had to live with it. And we say control the controllables all the time. I could not control any of it, but to get good sleep, to take care of my own health and fitness as much as possible. But I was, if I had to use one word, desperate.
You change the camera. A quick camera change here. I may cut this out. I may not cut this out, but we've got to restart the camera to make sure we capture all of this good stuff. Um, it is hot up here, by the way. It is. This is the first. I don't know if it's 80 degrees or not, but it is toasty up here. So, all right. So with all of that being said, I mean, a lot of times when we think of circumstances that are outside of our control, I don't think that most of us think about other people. Some people might, but for me, that's not where my head goes. My head goes to illness, it goes to misfortune, it goes to events and physical circumstances around us. But in this case, your part of your hard circumstance was another human being that you couldn't control. Do you in any way, shape, or form look back on everything you just said, including your relationship with that individual, and feel like you are better off for it, even if that was the last thing on your mind in the moment?
Looking back on it now, it absolutely, as crazy as this sounds, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So many positive reflections and life lessons came from the darkest and most difficult circumstances of my life. It sounds crazy, but I can't explain. For one, that deployment, all the circumstances brought me closer to three individuals. One being my company first sergeant, essentially your senior enlisted advisor. That's your right hand to the commander and the executive officer. I'll just call him G for now. But G is a little bit older. I think he's about 40. He might be 42 right now. But when I first met him, I didn't like him. I did not like him. I thought he was going to be a goof off. I thought he didn't know how to work hard. I thought he was lazy. But what it really was is he was experiencing all those things that I had with the commander. he was experiencing that behind closed doors and I just didn't know. So he was repressing who he was in front, of the soldiers and his coworkers in order to not project that what he was feeling. And we later found out that it was not only first sergeant, it was not only me, but it was my subordinate platoon leaders, all the other lieutenants, the platoon sergeants. So all of the leadership was feeling the negative effects of this commander before, during the deployment, and even afterwards. But we developed a brotherhood throughout all of it. Um, we come from similar cultural backgrounds. He has a Spanish background. I come from a Filipino background. And we bonded over, our culture, our upbringing. We bonded over the difficult things that we were experiencing with this commander. It was probably until about 2 months in Poland where we realized that it was both happening to us. And there was a moment where we almost cried together because we felt so alone and desperate and that we couldn't do anything about it. But then at least we had each other. And so, where we couldn't rely on the individual that was supposed to be leading us and responsible for the unit, we relied on each other to get things done. Where things were being um, maybe actions were being forgotten about, training was being forgot about. We were the ones checking up, following up, doing work at 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1 a.m. to get things done. And while we were going through these difficult times together, we were always checking up on each other to make sure that we got this stuff done. And it was felt by our peers, our subordinates, and even the other units. Our commander was malicious with the other units that we worked with and created negative relationships with everyone, with our higher units, with our adjacent units, our sister brother units, and no one wanted to work with this commander, so they all sought out G and me. So we made it work, but after all this time together, suffering together, sleeping in the same tent for 10 months together, we formed a brotherhood, and he is now one of my closest friends. Um, and I couldn't be more thankful because if there was one person that kept me grounded there, it was G. And I couldn't imagine going through that without him. I couldn't imagine my life now without him. Unfortunately, he's moved and is in a different place right now in the army. But we still keep in contact, and he's one of my best friends. The second individual. So I told you how I had to get rides from friends late at night. Um, one of my friends, one of my best friends at the time. Well, he's still one of my best friends, of course. I called him around I think 10 or 11 at night, and I asked him like, "Hey, brother, is I'll be done in 30 minutes. You think you can come pick me up?" He just said yes. So he comes and picks me up and is starting to drive me off post. I start seeing his eyes and his body language, and I go, "Hey, is everything all right?" And he's just not talking, not saying much. And so, like, okay, we're here in my car now. Let's go on a drive. So I get in my car. He sits in the passenger seat, and we just get on the road. And his one of his favorite places to go is a barbecue place in town. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's go get some barbecue. And on our way to the barbecue place, yeah, I just try to talk to him and say like, hey, how's everything okay? How's everything going? And he just tells me like everything's not okay. Everything is not okay. I'm like, okay, I am gonna go step inside the barbecue place and I'm gonna go get you food. And he's just not saying anything. I'm like, hey brother, are you okay? Still not saying anything. And I go, okay. After we get this food, I'm gonna drop you back off to your room. Can I call you in the morning to make sure that you're up for work? Are you gonna be up to make sure, that you're up? And he doesn't respond. And so right then and there, I asked the question like, hey, do we need to go get help? And he breaks down crying. I've never seen him in so much pain before. And so I knew what I needed to do. I go into the barbecue place and I say, hey, like I have a friend that's going through some problems right now. Is there any way? And they can see him through the window in my car. And I think they know I'm still in uniform at this point. So they know what's going on. They threw us a bunch of free food and drinks. Shout out to, barbecue place back in North Carolina. Um, but I had to get a little team together because I go, hey, I need to bring my friend to the emergency room at the hospital on post. I need someone to drive us. Unfortunately, And we get him checked into the emergency room, and I spent the whole night with him up until maybe like 3 in the morning while my other friend is in the parking lot waiting because they need to drive us, unfortunately. But I get him checked in to the emergency room, and upon a further evaluation, his leadership came and with him, and we did a trade off. But essentially, he was taken to the behavioral health ward in the hospital and was going to be further treated for depression and suicidal tendencies. I go to work. I go to work the next day, and like I actually, my friend dropped me off to my office. I slept in the couch in my office from it might have been 4 a.m. to like 6 a.m. Really short. And I go to work the next day, and there was an officer that's trying to hound me down because we're transporting vehicles off the installation, trying to ask me about something, and they're bothering me. They're taking me off. I'm of course irritated because I haven't slept, gone through an emotional night, and this person is really trying to bother me. And they go, "Hey, Lieutenant G, is everything okay?" And I respectfully go, "No, my best friend just tried to kill himself last night. I'm not okay, and I would really appreciate some space," or something of the sort. I didn't realize this until I came back. He was one of the first people to see me when I came back on July 4th, and we had a conversation. And he told me that he was fully committed to killing himself either the night of or the morning after. And in short, he told me that through my intervention and us talking, that he was able to get some help that he needed. He's doing significantly better now. Still not in the best place, but I know that God put me there in that moment, had put me in the circumstance of getting arrested, losing my job, needing to be there on post at 11 p.m. for me to be there for my best friend, to be able to be there when he needed it the most, when in a dark place he needed light. And I am so thankful that I was there, because if not, I don't think he'd still be here. So much love to one of my best friends. But the third individual that came out from all this is now my girlfriend, Courtney. I will make this the short story. This could be another podcast another day, but my girlfriend, Courtney, we met on the deployment, but we did not start our relationship until we came home. I'm active duty from North Carolina. She's National Guard from Michigan, and her unit essentially was the higher headquarters to my unit. The funny story is, we worked, if I'm on the first floor, she worked on the second floor, like right above me. People can't see that I'm pointing up at the ceiling right now, but she worked right above me the entire time. We both were in similar situations in which our commanders, our supervisors were toxic, malicious individuals. Um, and little did we know it or not, we were both working until 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1 a.m. every single night. And she tells this funny story that she would hear someone using the men's bathroom at night and just curious, like who in the world is awake right now? And the whole time it was me. It was me the entire time. Um, but we didn't talk for we were nothing more than just professional coworkers for 7 months. My first experience in interaction with her, she actually yelled at me because there was a vehicle accident and we had to report something and my commander messed something up. She actually yelled at me, and she said, "I apologize if I came off a little harsh." And I told her, "Yeah, you did, but it's okay." And that's our funny story of like our first interaction. But 7 months into the deployment, this was during COVID, and finally Europe had lifted COVID restrictions to allow for travel. There was a morale, welfare, and recreation trip. It was to the city of Krakow and to visit the concentration camp Auschwitz. So I was I had to go. I had to do something, get off post, and I had signed up for that trip. And me, First Sergeant G was there, and Courtney, she was on the trip as well. We didn't know, but uh, it was our first night, and I'm about to get dinner with myself, G, and one of my platoon leaders. Courtney texted me, and she goes, "Hi, I don't have anyone else, that's a friend or peer to go out with. Is it okay if I go to dinner with you?" And I don't even think I said yes. I think I said sure. But we get together, we go to dinner together, and we start talking. And she's great. She's smiling, and we're having a good conversation at dinner with my coworkers. It was our first time really off the small like mile. It was like a mile and a half long little operating base we were on, and we were living it up. We were eating delicious dinner. Currency American currency goes so much further in Poland, so we were having a great night, just eating great food. We tasted some I don't even know what I think it was local Polish soup. It was just delicious. I'm reminiscing on it now. It was great food. But further on to that night, Courtney and I just we keep talking and realizing we're going through similar things. But then also we were able to just to walk and talk about things other than the army. After being consumed in the military for the past 7 months, we got to talk about life, family back home, who we're missing, what's important to us, our values. We ended up talking about even family, what we want our future lives to look like, without having the like this. There wasn't any intention of anything romantic. The funny story is, I thought she was cute beforehand, but at the same time, knowing where we're at, going home, I'm just like, okay, she's cute. We're just gonna talk. Eventually, that time in Krakow led to a friendship because we had someone to confide in. We both realized that we were up at late hours in the night working, and for the rest of our time in Poland, we came to each other when we needed to take a breather, when we need to blow off steam from work. We would end up going on walks for hours and didn't even realize that we'd put in like 6-8 miles going on a walk for 2 to 3 hours, just talking about life and getting to know each other. Um, at a certain point in the deployment, later on, I think we have maybe a month left. Um, it came out. I told her that I had feelings for her, but knowing that we were going home, I didn't do anything about it. Eventually, she tells me as well, and just we're both smart individuals. We both like planning and doing the smart thing, and so we just stayed friends the entire time. After I came home on July 4th, I we just kept communicating. After she came home about 2 weeks later, we just kept communicating. And on my birthday, July 25th of 2021, she had called me at 12 in the morning, wished me happy birthday. And after a long 3-hour conversation, I just asked her from hints from some of her friends, I asked, I would love to see you again. Can we make this happen? In short, she said yes. And we made some time. And eventually, in August of 2021, she came down to North Carolina. She actually drove from Michigan. And right from then and there, we started our relationship that night. We realized that our feelings were much stronger for each other than we realized. But throughout everything that we went through, and the bonds that we shared over there, but then also just getting to know the true individual in person behind the uniform, um, we fell in love very fast after coming home. And so, looking back on my entire experience, getting arrested, the deployment, going through these battles, it was all for a reason. It was all part of the path and plan that God had set out for us. Courtney and I always say to each other, God introduced us to each other for a reason. And we didn't know what that reason was, but now we've been together for over a year and a half. Um, and life has never been better. And so, to Courtney, to my best friend, to First Sergeant G, I'm incredibly thankful for God putting them in my path and for us to build relationships together, because if none of the negative things that would have happened, I wouldn't have built these relationships, helped my friend out, met Courtney, if it wouldn't have never happened.
Man, it's just also beautiful, Chris. And I mean, now feels like the right time to share this quote from Steve Goodyear, who said, "Those who overcome great challenges will be changed and often in unexpected ways. For our struggles enter our lives as unwelcome guests, but they bring valuable gifts. And once the pain subsides, the gifts remain. These gifts are life's true treasures, bought at a great price, but cannot be acquired in any other way." And it sounds like that winding path, pretty far off path from where you thought you were going to be, led you not only to a love, not only to deeper friendships, to important moments in relationships for other people in their own journeys and their paths, but it's made you the person you are today in a lot of other ways, I'm sure. Now, you haven't only endured hard things, you also actively choose to do hard things, which is one of the things I love about you. And I'm very, very interested to hear your answer to this question because I know you've done plenty of hard things. If you had to pick just one, What is the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose, and why have you done that thing?
If my physical body can just give you an answer itself, it would automatically go to my last race, my 50-mile ultra marathon. And what an experience and journey it was. To paint some context, I decided to run my first ultra marathon roughly around November of, I think it was November of 2021 at that point. And funny enough, Spartan was having a Black Friday deal on races, and seeing guys like Nick Bear run his ultra, seeing people run triathlons and other incredible endurance feats. I knew I wanted to push myself further physically, but also recognizing and seeing the journey that training for one of these events takes you on. I knew that I was in a time in my life where I needed to experience something else in order to improve myself, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and that it did. So I signed up for my first race. Was a Spartan Ultra in May of 2022. It was a 50K. I ran it just to see if I can do it. I did a 6 month prep on my own, and I finished the race in 7 hours and I think 29 minutes roughly. I left and it was a good day. And someone had called me the next day and said, "Hey, Chris, like, did you know that you got third place in age group?" I had no idea. I didn't care. But from there, I realized after the race, one, I had more, but also two, I had gone through so much growth. It was a lot of physical growth in that first um, prep, a lot of physical growth, which led into a lifestyle change, more so like dialing in lifestyle priorities. But I knew from there I wanted to seek out something even more difficult. And so my original plan was to run, it was called the Beast of the East 50-mile ultra. It was supposed to be on December 10th of 2022. And I took a little break, did some speed and strength work, but then leading up to the fall, I went back into ultra prep. I had prepped even smarter for this one, having more intention behind the miles I was running, the training sessions, speed sessions, running easier than I needed to on my easy days, just making sure that I was building myself up without injury, which it went. The prep was phenomenal. I was stronger than ever before. I was more efficient than ever before. I felt incredible until the week of the race. I unfortunately, between I think the 2 days leading up to the race, I caught COVID. And while I felt fine 2 days before, the night before the race, I wasn't feeling too hot. And I tested positive, had the test in hand. And after a conversation with a good friend of mine and Courtney, I I wanted to make sure I did the right thing. And so I let the race director know the next day. I left it up to him. I came to the race prepared, ready to run if he would let me, but being smart about it and understanding his decision, he did not let me run. More so looking out for me than other people. Running is one of the few sports that you can create distance from people, which is nice. But he told me about a girl who ran, I think, the race previously, running the 100-mile version, and she almost passed away because of running with COVID complications. So Courtney and I drove back home, and I just felt really disappointed because I had prepped essentially the whole year leading up to December, ready for this race. And it was on our call together that week where you had mentioned that, I think, Chris, it sounds like you have unfinished business. And that became the theme of leading to the race. So I spent the whole week recovering. I didn't run, I didn't even bike, I didn't move. Courtney, God bless her, she helped nurse me back to somewhat of health. Um, and I was feeling decent. I recovered to, I'd like to say maybe 70, 75%. But we found a race that was in Tennessee, about 8 hours away. So Friday night before the race, we drove all the way to Tennessee. I was feeling healthy, like enough to run, but I also knew I had some complications. I wasn't breathing as well. And so Saturday morning, towed the line at the Lookout Mountain 50 miler. And it was a hard day. Over 50 miles, I think I covered almost 9,000 feet of elevation, and just being sick and not recovering well, not being primed to take on all of that strain. This was like, of course, I was unfamiliar with. My body just not being ready to take on 50 miles, even though I physically trained up for it. It was a tough day. It was a really tough day. And already by mile 18, my legs and my body was feeling smoked. And 18 out of 50, I mean, I was already in for a bad day at that point. So came into mile 32, which was probably the lowest like physical and mental point because my attitude was horrible. I was a little, I would like to say I was rude to Courtney a little bit because I think she did, there was no ramen noodle soup ready. And I was upset because there was no soup. And I had to go on this 6 mile loop and I came back with a better attitude. So mile 38 through like 46, we're doing well. We're cruising. We hit this nice long downhill portion. And I have a video of myself. I'm just like, we're at mile 40, less than 10 to go. I'm feeling good. And then I hit mile 47, 48, somewhere between there. And this was probably the lowest point completely in the entire race. It's dark because it's December and fear just starts setting in. Not fear of finishing the race, even though I'm tired, I'm losing energy, but there was a cutoff time. And I think I ended up being like 9 minutes before the cutoff time. But I'm here in the dark. I'm trudging back up hills that we went down before. And I'm telling myself I'm not going to make it. I was telling myself I'm not going to make the cutoff time. I'm not going to make it. And I was feeling desperate. I'm like, okay, what do we do now? And we talked about this. I had to dig deep down into a place where I had not been ever before. And I haven't had to dig like that in an extremely long time. And all that was left there was purpose, was the purpose to finish the race. All the people that were supporting me in this effort, the people that have helped me get to where I was now at that point, and thinking about, the cause I was doing this for, the foundation that I'm starting. It was just pure purpose. It wasn't a specific individual. It was all collected into one. I'm like, okay, let's do this. And so I trekking poles. I start digging into the ground and sprinting. I start moving hard. But then I hit mile 50 and I don't see any lights. I don't see, people. I don't hear music. And I'm like, there's no way. I'm done. There's no way that I'm not there yet. And I had no choice. And I really, I'm starting to get lightheaded at this point because I'm not consuming as much nutrition because I'm trying to focus on getting to the finish line. Within within maybe like, another quarter mile, I start to see lights, hear music, a finish line. And from there, I think I sprinted for maybe a half a mile or just around there. And I come into the finish line completely disoriented. Courtney was right in front of the finish line and I didn't even see her. I ran past her and then I had to take a double turn and go back to her. And then I gave her one of the biggest hugs, just saying, I want to go home. I was cold. I had nothing left in my system. If I needed to keep running, I probably could have. But through that effort of getting to the finish line with just about 9 minutes left before the cutoff, I was done, Joe. I was done, and I was just so proud of myself for finishing, but I couldn't even feel happy about it because all I wanted to do was go home. I was delirious. My face was swollen. It was freezing. And eventually we got home. I think I had McDonald's that night, and I never eat McDonald's, but I was craving a burger. I think we got double quarter pounders and Dr. Pepper. Yep, that's what it was. And I threw on some compression boots, and I kind of fell asleep on this couch at the Airbnb we were at. But running that 15 miles the day of the race in itself was the most difficult thing I've ever done. But the prep and the journey leading up to was it was meaningful. It was fulfilling. It was difficult. Everyone always talks about the time commitment it takes to, prepare for an ultra endurance event. And it did take a lot of time. I was earlier in the year, I was in a military school that I was preparing for. And then still later on that time in the fall, I was preparing to go to another school. And it was difficult, but it taught me, like as we always say, if it's important to you, you will make time. I hit the mileage that I needed to in my workouts. I prioritized the people and the places that became important to me. And I had to cut out a lot of distractions, maybe, distance myself from some relationships or people, opportunities that were not aiding or supporting the effort into running this race. But on the flip side, the amount of support that I got from our communities, from Courtney, from you, from everyone that was behind me. It was phenomenal and has led me to gaining this new standard of what difficult is in the pursuit of doing hard things. That is the hardest thing I've ever done so far, and it has absolutely primed me for not just physical feats, but for everything else that the life provides. In those times of desperation, in those times of being tired of getting up when I didn't want to, and running the miles or hitting my strength training sessions or spending an hour and a half on the Stairmaster with a weighted vest. I took that one from you, by the way. It taught me so much about myself and how much more I could do. And that's just one of my pursuits is finding out the more that exists within us. And then once finding that, it's never settling for anything less than what you found from yourself.
There's this quote that I can't remember verbatim, but it talks about when you do hard things, especially physical things that are hard, you gain access to this window or this curtain, I believe is the language that was used. And you have the choice to open that curtain and to see what's on the other side of it. And to continually do that, to know that there's more behind each subsequent curtain and to open them up and to find that other person and to become that other person that could do more and give more and be more is so powerful. And one of the reasons why I so firmly believe that doing hard things is imperative. If any of us want to fulfill our potential, become the best versions of ourselves, just find out what life has to offer. I feel like it's behind those curtains. And that requires endurance. It requires consistent, continued effort over a long period of time. And that doesn't just have to be physical, like you said. When you hear the word endure, I'm curious what comes to mind for you.
After listening to so many of your podcasts, it was incredibly difficult to come up with my own answer. And I've had my own answer for a while, but for me, endurance is just one's ability to persist. And throughout the physical things we go through, throughout everything that life has to hand to us, whether good or bad, it's one's ability to persist. And endurance is important in both not just the bad times, but the good times as well, because especially when things are going really well. Example in my case, you need to know one side of the coin to appreciate the other. And in some of my darkest times, I felt that I recognized that, and it consumed me. But then after coming back from the deployment and probably the darkest time of my life for an extended period of time, I came back with such an immense feeling of gratitude and it's an immense appreciation for life and everything that it has to offer. And while I'm off of that coming home high and feeling, I've maintained this level of gratitude and appreciation, being able to persist through difficult things on a daily basis now that I'm transitioning out of the military. We talk about this on a weekly basis of the highs and lows of entrepreneurship and starting a business, through relationships with your partner, with family, with friends. There are so many things that we need to endure in life and have endurance for. And it doesn't just go for the bad times, but we need to have it throughout all parts of our life. And with that, it had brought me to a place where um, I can now pursue my life with my three tenets: it's purpose, passion, and happiness. And if I can endure difficult things in order to fulfill that purpose, passion, and happiness, then I'm only pushing myself towards the life that I believe that I'm called to live. And so persistence is important. I think endurance is one of the greatest things that we have been given, but also you learn it, you grow it, you gain it, you can train it, as we do. But um, I'm just incredibly thankful that I have gone through difficult things to endure because it has made me the person, the man, the leader that I am now. And I couldn't look back on it any other way.
I like that definition. And when this episode airs, whenever that is, I'm not sure how many other episodes will have come before. However, that's unique and it kind of is making me think of endurance in a bit of a different way than I typically do. And like you said, endurance isn't just about the hard times or the bad times or the challenging times. It also applies to the good times, the easy times, the enjoyable times. And when you pair endurance with persistence, I almost have this visual of you're trying to get from point A to point B or wherever you are now to wherever you want to be. And the hard things can definitely push you off course. They can make you stop, they can distract you, they can slow you down, they can make you turn around and go the opposite direction. The good things, the easy things, the enjoyable things can also do the same. And so, how do you not get distracted? How do you continue to persist? How do you not let the hard times harden you and not let the good times soften you and continue to stay the course? Is a really cool way to look at it. So, I appreciate that. All right, cool. So that brings us to, I would say, my favorite question of the podcast. And I think it's my favorite because I know that there are people listening to this that need to hear whatever it is that you're going to say. There are people going through all different kinds of things right now. Everyone's struggling with something. It might look a little bit different on the surface, but at our core as humans, I think we can all relate to what it feels like to maybe not feel great. And so, for the people out there who are not feeling great, who are maybe in a dark season, you get to speak to them right now. And the mic is all yours.
One of the biggest themes in my life since the deployment through Army transition, building my two businesses, has been to live life as your true and authentic self. For so much of my life, I have been living for others or have been bound by the opinions, expectations of people. And I let that consume me in a way. I let other people's words, their opinions, their expectations become who I was. And at each chapter of my life, I felt untrue to myself. I felt unfulfilled. And I always felt that there was something else that was pulling me towards what I was truly called for. When I was growing up, my parents encouraged me and wanted me to become a doctor. And so I became a pre med student in college and I decided to commission into the military as a leader, where I felt God wanted me to serve in the military. I did, and I followed. And my parents were upset with that initially, and they support me now. But that was one expectation that was put on me that I felt like I needed to live out. And then coming into the military, there was a lot of expectations of what a military leader should do, should be. And while there are many great aspects to that, there's some culture in the military that almost cause you to lose your individuality. And through my time in service, I've seen many other people lose their individuality or have to work and act a certain way in order to further their careers. But I've seen a lot of those individuals lose more important things, such as their family, lose their sense of self, lose an identity that's other than the uniform. And I believe in some ways that I started to lose myself in the ways that I carried myself, the ways that I led, the ways that I had relationship with others. And so, recently the past year and a half, I felt another calling to start pursuing a life that was more true to me. And so that's what I did. I made the decision to transition out of the military. I'm still in that process, but now I'm pursuing professional photography as a business, where it was once a passion, and people told me that I couldn't make a career and living out of that. I couldn't have it support my life, and we're doing it. And now working as a mindset and performance coach with Project Endure, um, people always people didn't believe in me. I didn't believe in me, and now that I'm in a space and position to help others and serve others with the talent that I believe that God has given me, I want to be able to show others that you can do it too. You can build yourself. You can choose to do difficult things, do hard things in order to grow, in order to gain more endurance, to persist through the good times, the bad times. But you also have to choose it. You have to choose to live to be as your true and authentic self. And it has been one of the most liberating things for me. So if you are stuck in a place where you feel lost, stuck, uncertain, maybe unsure of where to go, listen to where your heart and mind go. Live life as your true and authentic self. Know that you can do hard things, that you too can do the amazing things that other people are doing. Don't compare, but learn from that. and see it within yourself, trust in yourself, believe in yourself that you also can do it.
Thank you for that, Chris. Uh, there's this saying, and I don't know who this gets credited to, but the longest journey is from the head to the heart. And I think to be your true, authentic self, you need to access the heart and you need to persist in that direction because I think a lot of times we let our head take over. And it's really awesome to see you trusting your heart and following that. And I'm so grateful to have an upfront seat to that and to share this time on the podcast. If people want to follow up with you, connect with you, just see what you're up to, where's the best place for them to do that?
So I'm kind of split right now between two places. I'm mainly on Instagram. You can follow me at Long Island Ninja, all one word. That is my personal and coaching account. And then if you are interested in photography or art and that way I'm pursuing life, you can follow me at Gabayan, Gabayan.media. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chris. I will link both of those in the description and make it easy for people. And I have to just say, I love the Long Island Ninja handle. It's funny because I'll have conversations with people and they'll be like, Chris Gabayan, who is that? And I'll be like, Long Island Ninja. And immediately it's like a light bulb. They're like, oh, yeah, I know who that is. So it's very memorable. I hope it stays around. And just thank you again for this.
Joe, thank you so much. Not for only this podcast, but for everything you do for myself, for others in the Project Indoor community. You really are a godsend. And so I'm thankful for you. I'm grateful for you, grateful for our relationship. And let's have a great weekend.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.